Next topic, types of friction. Frictions are mainly three types. First one, static friction, kinetic friction, and rolling friction. What is the static friction? Static friction means the force of friction that keeps a body stationary against an applied force is called static friction. And second one, kinetic friction. The force of friction that comes into play between the surfaces in contact when one body slides over to a surfaces is called kinetic friction. For example, when a person is dragging a sledge on ice, kinetic friction comes into play between sledge and ice. And next one, rolling friction. The force of friction that develops between a rolling body and the surface due to the deformation produced in them at the point of contact is called rolling friction. And next one, laws of static friction. Static friction opposes the tendency of motion of one surface over the other. Second one, it always act tangential to the surface in contact and opposite to the direction of applied force. And next one, static force is independent of the area of the surfaces in contact and depend on the nature of the surfaces and the roughness or smoothness of the surface. Next one, the magnitude of static friction increases with increases in applied force and reaches maximum value called limiting friction. The limiting friction between the surfaces in contact. Next, laws of kinetic friction. The kinetic friction opposes the relative motion between the two surfaces in contact. It is tangential to the surface and acts opposite to the direction of motion. The kinetic friction depends on the nature and condition of the surface in contact. Kinetic friction is independent of velocities of the surfaces. Kinetic friction is directly proportional to the normal reaction. Next, laws of rolling friction. The rolling friction opposes the rolling motion of a body over a surface. It is tangential to the surface at the point of contact and acts opposite to the direction of motion. Rolling friction is dependent upon the degree of deformation of the rolling body and the surface. Rolling friction is directly proportional to the normal reaction. Next one, coefficient of friction. The maximum force of static friction is directly proportional to the normal reaction between the surfaces in contact. So, the frictional force is directly proportional to the normal reaction. So, frictional force is equal to mu into R. Here, mu or mu s is indicated to the constant and it also is called to the coefficient of friction. So, what is the definition of the coefficient of friction? The ratio of force of static friction to the normal reaction. Similarly, you can write that coefficient of friction mu is equal to Fs by F. Coefficient friction mu is equal to F by normal reaction R. Suppose if you can take to the static friction, you can write that mu is equal to Fs by R. You can take that kinetic friction, you can write that mu is equal to Fk by R. Similarly, you can write that rolling friction mu is equal to Fr by R. So finally, the definition of the coefficient of friction is the ratio of frictional force to the normal reaction of the body.